Chapter 1, A Fateful Encounter. London, the city of power and opportunity. London's morning was shrouded in its signature mist, with streetlights casting a golden glow onto the marble-paved roads. The city bustled with hurried footsteps, luxury cars gliding down grand avenues, and towering skyscrapers reflecting the vibrancy of a metropolis where power, wealth, and intellect intertwined. At the Royal Grand Hotel, one of the most luxurious hotels in London, the International Medical Conference was in full swing. This was not just a gathering to discuss the future of medicine. It was an intellectual battleground where the brightest minds in the field came together, each driven by an unrelenting desire to change the world. Among the esteemed attendees stood a woman with neatly tied dark brown hair, piercing emerald green eyes, and an aura of quiet strength. She was surrounded by some of the world's leading physicians, yet she held her own with effortless confidence. Evelyn Carter, a gifted pediatrician, was one of the youngest participants at the conference. Growing up in an orphanage, Evelyn understood the pain of children without families better than anyone. She had chosen pediatrics not for fame or fortune, but because she never wanted another child to experience the loneliness she once endured. Armed with an exceptional medical degree from Oxford University and groundbreaking research on rare pediatric diseases, Evelyn had quickly risen to prominence. Yet despite her brilliance, she carried a secret, a congenital heart condition. She had been warned that pregnancy could pose a severe risk to her life. Because of this, marriage and motherhood had never been part of her plans. The man in the shadows. Across the Grand Hall, Max Reed, the CEO of Reed Tech, observed the crowd from behind a glass of whiskey. At 35, he was a man of calculated precision, his sharp gray eyes and neatly styled black hair exuding an air of authority that was both intimidating and enigmatic. Reed Tech was more than just a tech conglomerate. It was a symbol of artificial intelligence, modern medicine, and relentless innovation. Max was not merely a businessman, he was a strategist, a man who prioritized logic over emotion. Love had no place in his life. To him, everything could be programmed like a flawless algorithm. This was why his upcoming arranged marriage to Amelia Wessex was the perfect move. A seamless merger between two powerful families, a transaction rooted in economic and political gain rather than sentiment. Everything in his life was meticulously calculated until he met Evelyn, a clash of ideologies. The Grand Hall erupted in applause as a speaker concluded a presentation on artificial intelligence in medicine. Following the talk, an open panel discussion commenced, featuring industry experts, including Evelyn Carter and Max Reed. The debate was intense. Max was the first to speak. AI is revolutionizing the world. In the future, artificial intelligence will surpass human doctors in diagnosing diseases, minimizing human error, and optimizing treatment efficiency. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her voice calm yet sharp. You're talking about numbers and algorithms. But medicine is more than just diagnosis. It's about empathy, about the bond between doctors and patients. A machine may analyze data faster than we can, but it cannot comfort a frightened child or understand a mother's grief over losing her child. Max's lips curved into a cool smile. Emotions don't save lives, Dr. Carter. Logic and data do. The entire conference hall seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the clash between these two brilliant minds. One who believed in cold, hard science, and the other who fought for the human soul of medicine. When the debate ended, neither backed down. But even in opposition, one undeniable truth remained. They were drawn to each other by intelligence, by conviction, and by an unspoken intrigue neither could ignore. Chapter 2. Fate in the Bar. Evelyn stepped into the hotel bar, seeking a moment of solitude after an exhausting day. The medical conference had ended hours ago, but the echoes of her heated debate with Max Reed still lingered in her mind. She wasn't surprised to see him there, sitting at the bar with an air of effortless control. One hand cradled a glass of whiskey, the other idly spinning a silver ring on his finger, lost in thought. She considered turning away, but his gaze caught hers before she could move. "Ah, Dr. Carter." Max's voice was deep, smooth, laced with an amused edge. "Do you always have a habit of showing up when I'm trying to enjoy a quiet drink?" Evelyn smirked, stepping forward and setting her purse on the seat beside him. I didn't think someone like you needed peace and quiet. Isn't your mind always running at full speed? Max chuckled, raising his glass. I take it you're still upset about our debate this morning. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, a sharp glint in her emerald eyes. Not upset. Just intrigued that someone as intelligent as you actually believes AI can replace doctors? Max set his drink down and turned to face her. I never said AI could replace every doctor, but it can enhance efficiency, minimize human error, and even diagnose more accurately than we can? Evelyn shook her head, sipping her cocktail. Your mistake is assuming medicine is only about data and diagnosis. But you forget one crucial thing. People are not just numbers. Empathy, trust, human connection. Do you really believe AI can replace that? Max leaned back in his seat, eyes sharp yet intrigued. Do you honestly think doctors can afford to spend that kind of time with every patient? When an algorithm can analyze thousands of cases in seconds and recommend the most effective treatment plan? Evelyn set her glass down, crossing her arms as she met his gaze without hesitation. You see numbers. I see children with hopeful eyes. A machine might calculate faster than us, but it can't place a reassuring hand on a terrified child's shoulder and say, "Don't worry, I'm here to help." It can't hold a grieving mother who just lost her child. It can't decide what's best when all the data suggests there's no hope. Max studied her, as if she were a puzzle he hadn't quite solved yet. Do you always argue with this much passion, or is it just with me? Evelyn shrugged, lips curving into a playful smirk. Only when someone thinks machines can replace humans. Silence settled between them. Their differences remained, yet an unspoken understanding had formed, a mutual respect, an acknowledgement that each possessed something the other lacked. Evelyn couldn't deny that Max's perspective had merit, and Max found himself drawn to something he had never truly understood before: compassion without conditions. The tension of the morning's debate melted away, replaced by an unexpectedly easy conversation. They talked about work, the impossible choices Evelyn faced in the ER, the billion-dollar deals Max navigated with cold precision. They talked about the past. Evelyn spoke of her childhood in an orphanage, how she had fought her way up, choosing pediatrics so no child would feel as alone as she once had. Max revealed what it was like growing up in a billionaire family, where everything, even marriage, was a calculated move rather than a personal choice. Then they laughed. They forgot how fiercely they had clashed just hours ago. They forgot that they came from entirely different worlds. And then something shifted. Max's gaze darkened, and Evelyn felt her heartbeat quicken. Neither of them knew who leaned in first. All they knew was that when their lips met, logic ceased to exist. Gone was the brilliant doctor and the ruthless businessman. Gone were the two rivals who had stood on opposite sides of a stage, fiercely debating their beliefs. In that moment, they were just two people caught in a storm of undeniable attraction. The kiss started as an experiment, a curiosity neither could quite explain. But as breaths grew heavier, as Max's hand gripped her waist, pulling her closer, as Evelyn's fingers traced the back of his neck, they both knew they had crossed a line, and they didn't care. Tonight there was no future, no responsibilities, no dividing line between their worlds. There was only desire, raw and unfiltered. And as the hotel room door shut behind them, Max's gaze on Evelyn changed. Not the calculating look of a businessman, not the challenging stare of a rival, but the possessive intensity of a man unwilling to let go. Evelyn met his eyes. She said nothing. They both knew this was a mistake, but for now they didn't care. The morning sun crept through the thick hotel curtains, casting a soft golden glow across the luxurious room. The silence was undisturbed, save for the slow, steady breathing of the man still deep in slumber. Evelyn lay still, her emerald eyes staring up at the ceiling, her skin still warm where Max had touched her. She had never done anything like this before, not because she lacked the opportunity, but because she had always drawn a clear line between emotion and reason. But last night, the whiskey, the heated debate, the tension, and the undeniable pull between them had made her cross that line. She turned her head slightly, watching Max as he slept. He looked different from the sharp, composed man the world knew. Peaceful, His dark hair was slightly tousled, his breath slow and even, the tension that usually lined his brows nowhere to be seen. But he didn't belong to her. He was a billionaire, a man of power and business, of high-stakes deals and ruthless decisions. She was a pediatrician, someone who had dedicated her life to healing and loving the children who needed her most. More importantly, he was engaged. Evelyn inhaled deeply, then slowly slipped out of bed, moving carefully so as not to wake him. Grabbing her shirt, she pulled it over her shoulders, her bare feet silent against the cold wooden floor. She paused before the large mirror in the room, catching her own reflection. Her hair was slightly messy, her eyes unreadable, and the faint traces of last night lingered on her skin. Her fingers brushed lightly over her collarbone, where his lips had been. A mistake. A moment of weakness. She couldn't let this go any further. Steeling herself, she quietly gathered her belongings and slipped out of the room before Max woke up. Max stirred not long after, the first sensation he registered being the emptiness beside him. He sat up, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The space still held traces of her presence, the warmth on the sheets, the faint scent of her lingering in the air. But Evelyn was gone. No words, no goodbye, not even a lingering touch of hesitation. His gaze flickered to the pillow beside him, a strand of dark brown hair still resting there. Something unfamiliar twisted in his chest. This wasn't the first time a woman had left his bed without a word. He had never cared before. But this time was different. Evelyn Carter, the woman who had challenged him without fear, the woman who had stood toe-to-toe with him in a battle of wits, had walked away as if none of it had ever happened. And for some reason that bothered him. It wasn't that she left. It was the way she left, as if she had already erased him from her mind. No message, no trace, as if the night they shared was nothing more than a passing dream. Max swung his legs off the bed, making his way to the bathroom. As he stared at himself in the mirror, he frowned. He had spent the night with countless women before, but never had he felt like he had lost something the next morning. A fleeting dream, something he had no right to hold on to. He exhaled sharply, shaking off the absurd thought. He was Max Reed. One night wouldn't change him. He needed to forget. Evelyn returned to the hospital that same morning, slipping back into her white coat as if nothing had happened. She moved through the halls, her hands gently holding the small hands of her patients, her heart still full of love for the children who relied on her. Everything remained the same, except for the occasional quiet moment when her mind betrayed her. The warmth of his hands on her skin, the way he had looked at her in the darkness, the weight of his breath against her lips. She forced herself to forget. She had to forget, because there was no future between them. Max, too, returned to his world. Meetings, deals, strategic decisions. He continued preparations for his wedding to Amelia Wessex, a flawless arrangement, void of surprises. But in the stillness of certain nights, when even whiskey couldn't fill the empty spaces inside him, he thought of her. Not as a fleeting lover, but as something he shouldn't have let slip away. Yet they both chose to bury their thoughts. And so they continued down their separate paths, convincing themselves that that night had been nothing but a mistake. Or at least that's what they tried to believe. Welcome to Soul Stories. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am happy" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. Chapter 3, An Unexpected Truth, Carrying Life in Silence. London in mid-February was cold and damp. A thin veil of rain draped over the city like a gray silk sheet, casting an eerie gloom over the bustling streets. But inside a small apartment in Notting Hill, all was still. Evelyn Carter sat motionless by the window, her fingers gripping a piece of paper, as if letting go would shatter her entire world. A pregnancy test. 2 lines. She was pregnant, not with one, but with twins. Her breath caught in her chest as she stared at the grainy black and white ultrasound image in her lap, 2 tiny lives growing inside her. A foreign mix of emotions swelled within her: shock, fear, but above all, a fragile, undeniable joy. I grew up without a family, but my children, they will have their mother. Her hand instinctively rested on her still flat stomach. Nothing had changed on the outside, yet deep down, she knew her life would never be the same again. But that happiness was short-lived. Just a week after discovering her pregnancy, Evelyn had an appointment with her cardiologist. Evelyn, with your heart condition, pregnancy is extremely dangerous, and this is a twin pregnancy. Dr. Moore, one of the leading cardiologists, looked at her with concern. She wasn't just a doctor, she was a mentor, a trusted guide Evelyn had always admired. Your risk of heart failure will increase as the pregnancy progresses. The strain on your circulatory system will double, not to mention the dangers of preeclampsia, pulmonary edema. If things go wrong, all three of you could be at risk. Evelyn bit her lip, her hands clutching the hem of her dress. She had always known her congenital heart disease was a ticking time bomb, but she never imagined it would stand in the way of becoming a mother. Is there another way, doctor? Her voice trembled. Dr. Moore hesitated before answering. There is, but the safest option is early termination. 4 words. 4 words that felt like a knife to her chest. The world around her seemed to collapse. For the next week, Evelyn lived in a constant state of turmoil. She was a doctor. She knew the risks. She was a patient. She knew her limitations. But above all, she was a mother. And to be a mother meant putting her children above everything else. Chapter 4, A Mother's Choice. In the dimly lit doctor's lounge, the cold fluorescent light cast a pale glow over Evelyn's tired face. She sat at the table, absent-mindedly turning a cup of now-cold tea in her hands. Across from her, Emma stood with arms crossed, her gaze filled with frustration and worry. Eve, do you even realize what you're doing? Emma's voice was controlled, but the tension was unmistakable. Evelyn sighed, taking a slow sip of tea. I do. No, you don't, Emma snapped, shoving a stack of medical reports toward her. Look at this. Your heart is weakening. The strain from carrying twins is putting your body under immense pressure. If you keep going, period. If I keep going, then what? Evelyn lifted her gaze, eerily calm. I'll die? Emma fell silent. Evelyn let out a soft, bitter laugh. I'm a doctor, Emma. I knew all of this before you even handed me those papers. Emma's fist clenched. Then why are you being so stubborn? Evelyn set her tea down, her emerald eyes sharp with resolve. Because if I don't fight, if I give up, I won't just be losing one life. I'll be losing 2. Emma opened her mouth to argue, but Evelyn spoke first. Do you think I'm the only one fighting for survival here? Do you think I'm the only one struggling to stay alive? She placed a hand gently over her stomach, where 2 tiny heartbeats thrived against all odds. They're fighting too. From this very moment. They don't have a choice, but I do. Emma gritted her teeth, her expression pained. But if you die, they'll lose their mother. Evelyn inhaled deeply, shadows flickering behind her eyes. Then tell me, what do you want me to do? Abort them? Emma hesitated. If I make that choice now, wouldn't that make me the one taking their lives? Evelyn's voice was quiet, yet filled with something unshakable. If I die trying to protect them, at least that's a sacrifice. But if I give up now, that's a choice to end them. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with fury. I was an orphan, Emma. I know what it's like to grow up without a mother, to feel abandoned, to feel alone, like no one in this world truly loves you. Her fingers curled tighter around her stomach. I can't let my children go through that. Emma blinked rapidly, holding back the tears threatening to spill. I'm not the only life that matters here, Evelyn continued, her voice softer but resolute. I can't be selfish, because if I walk away from this, I'll spend the rest of my life drowning in regret. But if you die, Emma whispered, voice breaking, then at least I fought for them. Evelyn reached across the table, clasping Emma's hand tightly, her grip unyielding a silent vow. Emma, I don't need you to agree with me. I just need you to stand by me. If that day ever comes, promise me you'll protect them. Emma stared at her for a long moment before exhaling deeply. She knew Evelyn had made up her mind. Nothing would change it. All right, Evelyn smiled, warmth flickering in her weary eyes. The road ahead would be brutal. It would be painful. It might even cost her everything. But it was the one decision she would never regret. Evelyn hadn't thought about Max in all this time. They were never in love. In fact, they had always stood on opposite sides of everything. Their meeting had been nothing more than a mistake, a fleeting storm of emotions, fueled by alcohol and tension, crashing together for a single reckless night. She didn't need him, and he didn't need to know. He has a perfect life, Evelyn told herself. An arranged marriage, a massive empire, a world where I don't belong. And so she made her decision. She would never tell him about the children. Max Reed is not a father, and he doesn't need to be one. A dull ache pressed against her chest as she thought about it, but she convinced herself that this was for the best. Evelyn poured herself into her work in pregnancy. She no longer performed surgeries. She avoided overnight emergency shifts. She learned to take care of herself, gentle exercises, proper nutrition, strict monitoring of her health. But the scariest part? She could feel the changes happening inside her. Chapter 4. When Fear Strikes, a Mother's Hardest Choice. Evelyn's small apartment had always been her safe haven, but in recent weeks it had begun to feel suffocating. She sat in her armchair by the window, one hand resting on her swollen belly, feeling the gentle kicks of her unborn twins. They were growing stronger every day, yet her heart was failing her faster than ever. The chest pains had become a daily battle. At first, it was just occasional shortness of breath, but by the 6th month, everything had worsened. She couldn't climb a flight of stairs without feeling dizzy. Nights were restless. She lay awake in the darkness, listening to the heavy, uneven rhythm of her own heartbeat, a cruel reminder that her body was fighting against her. And then, the pain came like a tidal wave. That night, London was drowning in a cold, relentless rain. Evelyn had just stepped out of the shower when a sharp, suffocating pain struck her chest. Her heart clenched violently, her breath caught midair. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't inhale deeply enough. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. She collapsed onto the floor, hands clutching her chest, her entire body trembling. "No, not now. Please." Tears slipped from her eyes as terror gripped her. If she passed out here, alone, who would find her? Would she even make it to the hospital in time? And if she didn't survive, what would happen to her children? A vision flashed before her, a child sitting alone in an orphanage, with no parents, no family, no one to love them. She had been that child once. She knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to have no one to turn to. "I can't let my babies go through that." The pain slowly subsided after nearly 10 agonizing minutes, but the fear remained. From that moment on, Evelyn knew she didn't have much time left. Evelyn continued working. She still smiled for the children at the hospital, still carried herself with quiet strength. But when she returned home, the fear never left her. She went back to see Dr. Moore. "Evelyn, your condition is getting worse," the doctor said, eyes filled with worry. "If your heart continues to decline at this rate, you could go into acute heart failure at any moment. We may need to deliver the babies early to ensure everyone's safety." Preterm delivery. Evelyn looked down at her belly, where 2 tiny lives were still so fragile. "Will they survive if they're born too soon?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Moore hesitated. "It's risky, but the bigger question is, will you survive long enough to meet them?" Evelyn swallowed hard. She already knew the answer, and for the first time, she faced the inevitable. She might have to choose between herself and her children. "If it comes down to me or them," she started, her throat tightening. Dr. Moore sighed heavily. "Evelyn, no mother should have to make that choice." But Evelyn already had. She would choose them. That night, Evelyn sat on her bed, hugging her knees. The weight of an invisible force pressed against her chest, not from her failing heart, but from the choice she was about to make. She had to tell Max. Not because she needed him. She had already decided she would raise these children alone, no matter the cost. But if she didn't survive, her children needed someone to protect them. Max Reed might be cold, ruthless, and driven by power, but he wasn't cruel. He would never abandon his own blood. "I can't let my children become orphans like I was." They need someone, even if that someone is Max. But she knew that once she told him, everything would change forever. 3 weeks later, Evelyn stood outside Reed Tech Tower, the glass and steel skyscraper that symbolized Max's empire. She had once sworn she would never set foot here, but now she had no other choice. Her pulse pounded not from illness, but from anxiety. How will he react? Will he even believe me? Will he want the children? She had no answers, but she had to try. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. But when she asked for Max, she was met with an unexpected answer. He wasn't at the office. Frowning, she reached for her phone. There was only one thing left to do. She dialed his number. What was meant to be a simple conversation would soon turn into a storm that neither of them could escape. Chapter 5. Max's Choice, His Career or His Children. Max Reed had never hesitated before making a decision. As the head of a billion-dollar tech empire, a strategic mastermind, he had built his success by making ruthless, calculated moves without a second thought. He had faced high-stakes negotiations, outwitted the most formidable competitors, and never once lost control. But then, Evelyn Carter called him. That morning in his penthouse suite, Max sat in his leather chair, scrolling through emails with one hand, a glass of whiskey in the other. Tomorrow was the day of his official engagement announcement to Amelia Wessex, a powerful alliance between two of the wealthiest families in England. Everything was set, everything was going according to plan. And then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowning. Evelyn Carter. For a split second, he hesitated. Then he answered. Max, we need to talk. Her voice was as composed as ever, but something was off, a subtle unease beneath each breath. He leaned back, setting his glass down. What is it? Silence stretched between them. Then her next words changed everything. I'm pregnant, and they're yours. The world around Max went completely still. His chest tightened. His breath caught. What? His voice dropped to a dangerously low register. I'm pregnant, with twins, Evelyn repeated, as if making sure he fully grasped the reality of the situation. Max closed his eyes, his mind momentarily blank. This wasn't possible. One reckless night shouldn't have led to this. But there was no doubt in her voice. His fingers instinctively gripped the armrest of his chair. Why are you only telling me now? A quiet inhale. Then, because I didn't think you needed to know. Her words hit harder than they should have. A sharp, unfamiliar sting twisted in his chest. Then why are you telling me now? More silence. Then for the first time, he heard it, fear in her voice. Because I'm scared. His brow furrowed. Scared of what? She hesitated, then in a voice barely above a whisper. I was born with a heart condition, Max. Carrying twins is putting too much strain on my body. My doctors, they don't know if I'll survive. Max stopped breathing. Evelyn pressed on, her voice trembling but unwavering. I know you have your own life. I know your marriage is a business strategy. I'm not calling to change that. A pause, then, softer, more fragile. I just need to ask, if I don't make it, please take care of our children. Something inside him snapped. Max had always prided himself on being logical, detached, untouchable. But right now, he wasn't any of those things. Don't talk like that, he said, his voice rougher than intended. Evelyn let out a hollow laugh. I'm a doctor, Max. I know my condition better than anyone. He pushed himself up from his chair, stalking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked London's skyline. The city lights blurred into a chaotic mess. For the first time in his life, Max didn't know what the right move was. He had always been able to afford losing anything: a deal, a company, even people. But not this. Not her telling him she might die. And definitely not the thought of 2 children being left behind without him. He couldn't accept that. He wouldn't accept that. Where are you? His voice was sharp, urgent. Evelyn hesitated. Why? Tell me where you are, Evelyn. It was no longer a question. It was an order. She swallowed. St. Thomas Hospital. Max grabbed his coat. Tonight, he was about to make the most important decision of his life. The arranged marriage between Reed Tech and the Wessex family had been meticulously planned for over a year. His family, his shareholders, and the entire business world were watching, waiting for this alliance to solidify. Amelia Wessex, his fiancée, stood before him, poised and stunning in her designer gown. She was the perfect choice, beautiful, intelligent, and strategically aligned with his empire. But at this moment, Max Reed had only one thought in his mind. Evelyn is carrying my children, and she could die if she wasn't properly cared for. A sharp foreign ache twisted in his chest. Max had never cared about anyone this much. But the image of Evelyn, alone, battling a dangerous pregnancy while he stood here, preparing to marry another woman, was something he couldn't ignore. When the news broke, all hell broke loose. His father, a man of iron will and ruthless ambition, looked at him with pure disappointment. You cannot throw away this marriage for a woman who holds no strategic value. His mother, a woman who valued reputation above all else, gripped her wineglass tightly. Have you thought about the consequences? If you cancel the engagement now, Reed Tech's stock will plummet. Investors will lose confidence in you. This is your career, Max. He heard every word, but only one thing consumed his mind. Evelyn could die without the right care. My children could be orphaned. Max had never felt so torn. On one side was his empire, everything he had worked for, the legacy he was meant to continue. On the other was Evelyn, a woman who had never once asked him for anything, who had fought alone to protect their children. For the first time in his life, Max felt powerless. He could easily shut off his heart, pretend nothing had changed, and go through with this strategic marriage. Or he could burn everything down and walk away from the path that had been decided for him. I can rebuild my career, but if something happens to Evelyn, I will never forgive myself. The thought struck him like lightning. Today was his engagement day. Max stood before the mirror in his private dressing room, dressed in his perfectly tailored suit. He looked the part, the epitome of power and control, the CEO destined for greatness. But inside, he felt absolutely nothing. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was fighting for her life, protecting their children on her own. And he was standing here, about to promise himself to a woman he didn't love. His grip tightened around the edge of the sink. Then, for the first time in his life, Max Reed made a choice not based on business, not on logic, but on his heart. Chapter 6, Max's Choice. Walk away or step up. The silk tie landed on the table with force. Max yanked open the top button of his collar, exhaling sharply. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. A flawless, arranged marriage, a mutually beneficial partnership, a strategic alliance between two of England's most powerful families. Everything had been calculated. But now, none of it mattered, because he couldn't ignore the truth. The grand engagement hall shimmered under golden chandeliers. Guests in elegant evening gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled, exchanging pleasantries, raising glasses of champagne. Laughter, polite applause, conversations filled the air. In the center of it all, Amelia Wessex stood poised, beautiful, composed, and every bit the perfect fiancée. She had been raised for this role, trained to be the ideal wife for a man like Max Reed. But the moment she saw him striding toward her, something in his eyes made her stiffen. Max, what are you doing? Her voice was low, careful, guarded. Max stopped in front of her, his blue eyes no longer cold and controlled, but filled with something Amelia had never seen before. Certainty, determination, and a quiet resignation. I'm sorry, Amelia. The room fell silent. Some guests turned, sensing the shift in the air. Sorry? Amelia's brows lifted, as if she hadn't fully processed his words. Max swallowed hard but held her gaze. I can't marry you. The entire hall froze. A quiet gasp rippled through the crowd. Eyes darted toward them, whispers forming like a wildfire. Amelia stood motionless, gripping her champagne glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Everything has been planned. Do you even realize what you're destroying? She hissed. I know. His voice was steady, unwavering. And I'm sorry, but I can't lie to you, or to myself. Amelia's breath hitched. Then she let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Let me guess, she murmured, her voice laced with bitter amusement. This is about her, isn't it? Max didn't flinch. It's about my children. Amelia went completely still. For the first time, true shock flickered in her gaze. She's pregnant? Yes. He didn't hesitate. With twins. A sharp exhale escaped her lips. The truth landed heavier than any betrayal could have. We never even discussed having children, Max, she whispered, voice trembling with something between anger and disbelief. And yet, she's carrying yours. Max exhaled, forcing himself to say the words he knew would hurt her the most. Amelia, I thought marriage was just about strategy, that love didn't matter, and that made you the perfect choice. A bitter smile curled on her lips. But now you realize that marriage isn't just a business deal, is it? Max nodded slowly. I spent my whole life believing emotions were a weakness. That love was unnecessary. But if I go through with this, it wouldn't just be unfair to me. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time as a person, not a partner in a contract. It would be unfair to you. Amelia held his gaze for what felt like an eternity. She wasn't weak, she wasn't the type to cry or beg. But this hurt. She had played her role perfectly. The ideal fiancé, the flawless choice. Yet in the end, she wasn't enough. Her fingers curled around her purse, nails digging into the leather. And what about her? She finally asked, voice eerily calm. Do you love her? Max hesitated, because he didn't know. What he did know was that he couldn't leave Evelyn alone. He couldn't stand aside while their children's mother fought for her life. And maybe that meant more than love. I don't have an answer for that. His voice was quiet but firm. But I do know this. I can't abandon her. Or them. Amelia studied him, searching. And then something in her broke. She exhaled a soft, bitter laugh. You know what, Max? Her voice was sharp, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. Pain, disappointment, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of relief. We're the same. We've spent our whole lives trying to control everything, only to realize we can't even control our own fate. Max didn't argue, because she was right. Amelia took one last, lingering look at him, then straightened her shoulders. Her pride remained unshaken. Her dignity remained intact. And with a final, resolute whisper, "Goodbye, Max," she turned and walked away, and Max let her go. Because for the first time in his life, he was about to walk towards something uncertain, uncalculated, and completely out of his control. As Amelia disappeared into the crowd, Max exhaled deeply, dragging a hand through his hair. Whispers surged through the hall, a tidal wave of gossip and speculation. His mother's expression was frozen in horror, his father's full of fury. The shareholders would be calling by morning. But none of it mattered, because somewhere out there, Evelyn was fighting this battle alone. And for the first time in his life, Max Reed chose not to fight for an empire, but for a family. For the first time in his life, Max Reed chose his heart over his empire. The Bentley sped through the streets of London, its engine roaring against the city's night. Max had never been in such a hurry before. Not for a deal, not for a merger, not even for his own future, but for her, for them. When he arrived at the hospital, Evelyn was walking down the hallway, her pace slow, tired, the weight of her pregnancy evident in every step. He stepped out of the car without hesitation. Then he walked straight toward her. Evelyn! She stopped abruptly. Her heart pounded as she stared at the man she thought she'd never see again. Max? He took a deep breath, his blue eyes locked onto hers. I'm here. Evelyn couldn't believe it. But your engagement, she whispered. I called it off. His voice was steady, unwavering. I couldn't go through with it, not when you and our children are in danger. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. Max, you didn't have to do this. Max stepped closer, his hand gently pressing against her growing belly. No, he said softly. I had to. A shuddered breath escaped her lips. Then he whispered the words that shattered the last of her defenses. I can rebuild my career, but if something happens to you, I will never forgive myself. Evelyn stared at him, the man who had once been untouchable, cold, unshaken, now standing before her, having risked everything just to be by her side. Are you sure? Her voice cracked. Without hesitation, Max nodded. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. And there, in the middle of the hospital hallway, amidst the bustling crowd, Max Reed chose not power, not wealth, not the safe path laid out for him. He chose fatherhood. He chose Evelyn. He chose them. No matter how difficult the road ahead would be. Chapter 7. Breathless Days. A Fight for Life. Max gave up everything. For the first time, he feared losing someone. When Max learned that Evelyn was carrying his twins and that her health was deteriorating, he made the unthinkable decision. He walked away from his engagement and chose to stay by her side. He moved into her apartment. He put all of Reed Tech's major decisions on hold, something that had never happened before. Reed Tech can run without me, but you and our children, you can't. For the first time in his life, Max faced a problem that neither money nor power could fix. You could die if you continue this pregnancy, he reminded her. The doctors have warned you. But Evelyn's eyes remained unshaken. I won't abandon our children. Max stared at her, a painful helplessness pressing against his chest. Then I won't leave you alone. The battle for survival, emergency after emergency. By the time Evelyn reached her 7th month, her condition had severely worsened. Week 28, acute heart failure. She was rushed to the hospital, struggling to breathe, her heartbeat dangerously irregular. Doctors urged her to deliver early, warning that she might not survive. But Evelyn knew, the earlier they were born, the greater the risk to their fragile lives. Week 29, extreme fatigue and swelling. She could barely walk, her body weak and swollen. Every breath felt like a tight fist around her lungs. Week 30, sudden collapse. One evening, she lost consciousness in the living room. Max caught her just in time, but for a moment, his world stopped. As he carried her to the hospital, his heart pounded with fear. Don't scare me like that again, Evelyn. I can't lose you. For years, Max had been known as a ruthless businessman, sharp, calculating, untouchable. But now, every night he sat beside Evelyn's bed, his hand resting on her belly, listening to their children's tiny heartbeats. He memorized every medical detail, every prescribed medication. He stayed awake, watching her chest rise and fall, making sure she was still breathing. I used to believe everything in life could be controlled, he admitted one night. But for the first time, I'm afraid of losing you. Evelyn said nothing. She simply reached for his hand and held it tight. Late at night, the soft glow of the bedside lamp cast shadows across the walls. Evelyn lay on her side, cradling her belly, exhausted. But then, a gentle movement inside her. She gasped softly. Max, she whispered, her voice trembling. The baby just kicked. Across the room, Max immediately abandoned his work. He strode over, his expression sharp with shock and anticipation. Can I feel it? His deep voice held an uncharacteristic hesitation. Evelyn smiled, guiding his hand onto her belly. At first, nothing. Then, a strong, undeniable kick. Max froze. He had closed million-dollar deals without blinking. He had stood before ruthless competitors without a flicker of emotion. But this was something else entirely. His fingers tensed, pressing slightly harder as if afraid the moment would slip away. They're real, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Evelyn studied him, noticing something different in his face. For the first time, she saw Max Reed, the man, not the businessman, completely vulnerable. And for the first time, she realized he had changed. From that night on, a new habit formed between them. Every night before Evelyn slept, Max would place his hand on her belly and whisper to their unborn twins, "It's Dad. Can you hear me?" His voice was gentle, no longer sharp and commanding. "Did Mom eat enough today? Were you being good, or did you give her a hard time?" Evelyn lay still, a quiet smile playing on her lips. The warmth of his palm against her stomach was oddly comforting. "Take it easy on her, all right?" Max murmured, rubbing slow, careful circles over her belly. One night, Evelyn laughed softly. "Are you serious about this?" she teased. Max lifted his gaze to hers, deep blue, unwavering. "I have never been more serious about anything in my life." For some reason, her heartbeat stuttered. She had always thought he was doing this out of responsibility, But in his eyes there was no reluctance, no obligation, only a man who had fully embraced his role. She didn't say anything else. She only pressed her hand gently against her belly, right over his. For the first time in months, she felt like she wasn't alone anymore. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. Between Life and Death. Week 31, Evelyn's condition becomes critical. By the 8th month of pregnancy, Evelyn's body was failing rapidly. She could barely breathe, needing support just to walk. Her heartbeats were erratic, her blood pressure unstable. Her body was collapsing. Dark circles lined her eyes from weeks of sleepless nights, yet she still smiled every time Max looked at her with worry. Then, one fateful night, a crippling pain crushed her chest. She collapsed in the living room. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" Max caught her before she hit the ground, but her body had already gone limp. For the first time in his life, sheer panic gripped him. Lifting her into his arms, he raced to the car and sped to the hospital, his mind screaming one thing. He couldn't lose her. "We need to operate immediately." Doctors rushed to evaluate Evelyn's condition, their expressions grim. "We can't delay any longer. The babies need to be delivered now." Max froze. "What are the risks?" His voice was hoarse. The doctor hesitated. "If we prioritize the mother, we might lose the babies. If we prioritize the babies, she might not survive." The words slashed through Max like a knife. As Evelyn was wheeled into surgery, she tightened her grip on his hand, looking up at him with fierce determination. "No matter what happens, save my children first." "No!" Max's voice cracked. His eyes burned red. "I won't choose. I want all three of you to live." The surgical doors shut, separating them. Max stood there motionless, his entire world crumbling. Inside the operating room, Evelyn's heart rate plummeted as her body fought to keep both herself and her babies alive. Doctors struggled to maintain blood circulation for all three. Her heart nearly stopped, forcing emergency intervention mid-surgery. The twins were born premature, their lungs undeveloped but alive. The operation lasted 10 excruciating hours. Outside, Max sat frozen, his fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his skin. "If I lose you, how am I supposed to keep living?" Every minute that passed was another blade cutting into his soul. Lucas, his most trusted assistant, stood nearby, silent. He had never seen Max so broken before. "If I could trade everything I have for you to live, Evelyn, I would." Then, the doors finally opened. A nurse emerged, holding 2 tiny bundles wrapped in soft blankets. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. Your twins are safe." Max's breath hitched. The nurse gently placed them in his arms. For the first time in his life, Max Reed cried, silent tears slipping down his face. "They're so small," he whispered, staring at his children. One of the babies, barely the size of his forearm, wrapped their tiny fingers around his thumb. A miracle of life, but his heart was still missing something. "What about Evelyn?" His head snapped up, searching the doctors' faces, only to see no relief in their expressions. "We did everything we could," one doctor finally said, "but her heart was too weak. Evelyn is still unconscious." A cold dread washed over Max. "You have to save her." His voice shook with fury and desperation. He held his children tightly, but his soul felt incomplete. Evelyn hadn't seen them yet. He leaned close to her hospital bed, his voice barely a whisper. "We did it, Evelyn. The babies are here. But I need you to wake up. I need you to see them." In the intensive care unit, Evelyn lay unconscious, her body fighting to survive. The machines beeped slowly, monitoring her fragile heart. Max never left her side. Every day he sat by her bed, talking to her about their children. Every night he held her hand, waiting for the slightest movement. He gave up everything, his company, his obligations, because none of it mattered if she didn't wake up. The doctors gave no certainty. She might wake up, or she might never open her eyes again. "No!" Max's voice was steel. "She will wake up. She has to." On the 5th day, Max sat by her bed, his head resting on his folded arms, exhausted. Then, a soft voice, barely above a whisper. "Max!" His eyes snapped open. He lifted his head, staring in disbelief as Evelyn's blue-green eyes blinked open for the first time. His heart pounded painfully. "Evelyn!" His voice cracked as he cupped her face, overwhelmed with relief, love, and raw emotion. She swallowed, her throat dry. Her first words, "Where are the babies?" Without hesitation, Max grabbed their tiny bundles, placing them carefully in her arms. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as she looked at them, her children alive and safe. She let out a soft, choked sob, clutching them to her chest. "We made it!" Max watched her, his eyes filled with something he had never shown before, pure, unguarded love. He gently brushed a tear from her cheek, whispering, "Thank you for not leaving me." Evelyn looked up at him, her lips trembling into a weak smile. "We did it, Max." And for the first time, their family was truly whole. Chapter 9. A proposal full of emotion. Evelyn's recovery was slow but steady. Her heart was weaker than before, but every day she felt stronger, not just because of the medical treatments, but because of the two tiny miracles she had brought into the world, and because of him. Max Reed, the man who had once prioritized business above all else, was now a devoted father and partner. He learned how to change diapers, soothe the babies when they cried, and rock them to sleep in the middle of the night. He spent hours beside Evelyn, reading to her just as he had whispered to their children when they were still inside her. His lavish office at home was no longer just for contracts and negotiations. It had become a playroom, filled with toys, baby blankets, and the sound of laughter. Everything in his life had shifted, and for the first time, he wouldn't change a thing. A spring afternoon and a hidden plan. It was a bright spring afternoon when Evelyn finally took her first steps outside since giving birth. The fresh air filled her lungs, and the gentle warmth of the sun kissed her skin as she slowly walked through the small garden, pushing the stroller with their sleeping twins inside. She had no idea that while she was healing, Max had been planning something life-changing. As she continued down the garden path, Evelyn suddenly noticed something unusual. The small walkway leading to the lake had been decorated with delicate white rose petals. Fairy lights sparkled along the trees, creating a scene that looked like something out of a dream. She stopped in her tracks. Her heart pounded when she saw Max standing at the end of the path. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, but for once it wasn't the clothes that made him look powerful. It was the look in his eyes, deep, certain, and filled with a tenderness she had never seen in anyone before. "Max, what is all this?" she whispered, overwhelmed. He stepped toward her, his expression steady and unwavering. Then, to her complete shock, he knelt down on one knee. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Max pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Elegant and simple, just like the love that had grown between them. His voice, deep and unwavering, filled the quiet garden. "Evelyn Carter," he began, "I once believed my life was only about business, about strategic decisions and fulfilling obligations. But then you came into my life and changed everything." Her eyes shimmered with tears. Max looked up at her, his blue eyes more open and vulnerable than ever before. "You taught me what it means to sacrifice, to put my heart before logic. You gave me two beautiful children, and you almost gave up your own life to bring them into this world." Evelyn lifted her trembling hand to her lips, trying to hold back a sob. Max smiled softly. "I used to think everything in life needed a plan," he admitted, a light chuckle escaping his lips. "But you were the unexpected miracle I never knew I needed." Then he took a deep breath, his voice dropping to a raw, intimate tone. "I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you, caring for you, and loving you, not because it's my responsibility, but because I love you." Evelyn gasped, her vision blurred by tears. Then he held out his hand, offering her more than just a ring. He was offering her forever. "Evelyn, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had once thought her life would always be a solitary fight, that she would always have to stand alone. But now this man, who had once been cold, untouchable, and distant, was kneeling before her, asking her to be his partner for life. She didn't need time to think. With a shaky breath, She reached out, placing her trembling hand in his, and then she nodded. Yes, she whispered through her tears. Yes, Max, I'll marry you. A relieved, almost disbelieving smile spread across Max's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. From the stroller, their two babies stirred, as if sensing their parents' overwhelming joy. Evelyn laughed through her tears, pressing her forehead against Max's chest. They know, she murmured. Max chuckled, his voice husky with emotion. They should. This is the beginning of our family. And for the first time, they weren't just two people bound by responsibility. They were a real family, choosing each other. For love, for forever. A spring afternoon and a hidden plan. It was a bright spring afternoon when Evelyn finally took her first steps outside since giving birth. The fresh air filled her lungs and the gentle warmth of the sun kissed her skin as she slowly walked through the small garden, pushing the stroller with their sleeping twins inside. She had no idea that while she was healing, Max had been planning something life-changing. As she continued down the garden path, Evelyn suddenly noticed something unusual. The small walkway leading to the lake had been decorated with delicate white rose petals. Fairy lights sparkled along the trees, creating a scene that looked like something out of a dream. She stopped in her tracks. Her heart pounded when she saw Max standing at the end of the path. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, but for once it wasn't the clothes that made him look powerful. It was the look in his eyes, deep, certain, and filled with a tenderness she had never seen in anyone before. Max, what is all this? She whispered, overwhelmed. He stepped toward her, his expression steady and unwavering. Then, to her complete shock, he knelt down on one knee. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Max pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Elegant and simple, just like the love that had grown between them. His voice, deep and unwavering, filled the quiet garden. Evelyn Carter, he began, I once believed my life was only about business, about strategic decisions and fulfilling obligations. But then you came into my life and changed everything. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Max looked up at her, his blue eyes more open and vulnerable than ever before. You taught me what it means to sacrifice, to put my heart before logic. You gave me two beautiful children, and you almost gave up your own life to bring them into this world. Evelyn lifted her trembling hand to her lips, trying to hold back a sob. Max smiled softly. I used to think everything in life needed a plan, he admitted, a light chuckle escaping his lips. But you were the unexpected miracle I never knew I needed. Then he took a deep breath, his voice dropping to a raw, intimate tone. I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you, caring for you, and loving you. Not because it's my responsibility, but because I love you. Evelyn gasped, her vision blurred by tears. Then he held out his hand, offering her more than just a ring. He was offering her forever. Evelyn, will you marry me? Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had once thought her life would always be a solitary fight, that she would always have to stand alone. But now this man, who had once been cold, untouchable, and distant, was kneeling before her, asking her to be his partner for life. She didn't need time to think. With a shaky breath, she reached out, placing her trembling hand in his. And then she nodded. Yes, she whispered through her tears. Yes, Max. I'll marry you. A relieved, almost disbelieving smile spread across Max's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. From the stroller, their two babies stirred, as if sensing their parents' overwhelming joy. Evelyn laughed through her tears, pressing her forehead against Max's chest. They know, she murmured. Max chuckled, his voice husky with emotion. They should. This is the beginning of our family. And for the first time, they weren't just two people bound by responsibility. They were a real family choosing each other. For love, for forever. Years later, Max and Evelyn Reed stood before the newly built medical center, watching as the first group of children ran through the doors, their laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. The Carter Reed Foundation, a state-of-the-art medical facility providing free health care for orphan children and women in need, was finally a reality. It was Evelyn's dream, born from her own past as an orphan, and Max's promise to build something greater than wealth, something that would change lives. Inside the center, pediatricians and volunteer doctors worked tirelessly, ensuring that every child, every mother who walked through those doors received the care they deserved. No questions asked, no financial burden. Max stood beside Evelyn, his arm wrapped around her waist as they watched a young girl. No older than Evelyn had been when she lost everything. Clutching a teddy bear as a nurse gently took her hand, Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes, overwhelmed with emotion. "We did it," she whispered. Max turned to her, his expression soft, full of love. "No," he corrected. "You did this. You turned your pain into something beautiful." She looked up at him, smiling through her tears. "We did this together." As their two children, a boy and girl, Tom and Mia, now full of energy and life, ran up to them, Max lifted them into his arms, their laughter filling the air. This was their legacy, not just wealth, not just power, but a place where no child would ever feel alone again. And for the first time in their lives, both Max and Evelyn knew they had built something truly unbreakable. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.